Most people go their entire lives without ever crossing someone who's both quiet and prepared. Someone who doesn't yell, doesn't argue, doesn't posture online, but carries a kind of stillness that makes other people underestimate them right before their entire world collapses in slow motion. That's exactly what the HOA vice president, Leonard Briggs, did the night he ripped out 300 solar pathway lights from the yard of a man he barely knew. A man named Malik Torres. And that single act, petty, loud, and impulsive, would end up costing every member of that HOA board their assets, their savings, their reputations, and their futures. All because one man needed darkness in a neighborhood where everyone else was trying to create light. Welcome to Honorbound Tales. Before we dive in, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and comment your location below. We'd love seeing how far these stories of justice travel around the world. Now let's get into this one, because even for HOA horror stories, this one drops like a hammer. To understand how everything spiraled, you have to understand Malik. He wasn't the type people placed on neighborhood committees or invited to wine and cheese nights. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, and he wasn't the type who put political stickers on his truck or posted in neighborhood Facebook wars. He was just a man who moved into the community looking for quiet, after several years of medical problems that left him dealing with intense nighttime disorientation. The solar lights he installed were part of a disability accommodation filed with the county, glow markers lining his walkway and gardens so he could navigate at night without falling, tripping, or losing his bearings. The lights weren't decorative, they were lifelines. But Leonard Briggs didn't like lights. Or maybe it would be more accurate to say he didn't like anyone else having something he couldn't control. He'd been HOA vice president for 6 years, and in that time he'd built a reputation for ruling by irritation. Fines, warnings, complaint letters, and passive-aggressive notes stuffed into mailboxes at 2 a.m. He was the kind of man who would measure lawns with a ruler and threaten to cite families whose kids left chalk drawings on the sidewalk. So when Malik installed those 300 small solar markers, soft, warm, unobtrusive, Leonard convinced himself they were light pollution, despite never once consulting the rules or considering that maybe they weren't his business. Instead, he stormed onto Malik's property in the middle of the night and started ripping all of them out like a man possessed. Malik woke to the sound of snapping plastic and heavy footsteps. He stepped outside just in time to see Leonard wrenching the final light out of the dirt and tossing it in a trash bag like evidence of some crime. Leonard didn't apologize, didn't even try to explain. His face was lit by the porch light, tight, smug, and triumphant, as if he expected gratitude for his cleanup job. The only thing he said before marching down the driveway was, "HOA ordinances don't allow excessive illumination. I suggest you read your handbook." Then he left Malik standing in the cold with 300 destroyed solar lights, $12,000 worth, scattered across his lawn. He had no idea that every single one of those lights was part of a federally protected disability accommodation. And more importantly, he had no idea Malik had been in the middle of filing a lawsuit against the HOA. Those lights were court-ordered evidence, property with legal protections attached. And Leonard had just destroyed them willingly, knowingly, and loudly. In one night, he committed the legal equivalent of dropping a lit match into a dry, brittle forest. Malik didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't demand Leonard return. He simply picked up every piece of shattered light, placed them neatly in a box, and loaded them into his car. The next morning, he drove them to his attorney. And that attorney, who had warned the HOA twice in legal letters not to interfere with the accommodation, smiled in a way that scared even Malik. Spoliation of evidence. That was the phrase she used, a phrase that turns judges into executioners. A phrase that means you destroyed the proof, so you lose automatically. 2 weeks later, the courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the judge's pen tapping the desk. Leonard sat at the defendant's table, trying to shrink into his suit. The other board members were behind him, frozen, pale, and breathing shallowly. Malik sat across the room, hands folded, calm in that way only a man who already knows he's won can be. The judge reviewed the photos of the lights, the receipts, the disability documentation, the attorney warnings, and the HOA's refusal to accommodate. Then the video, captured by a neighbor's door camera, of Leonard tearing out lights like he was uprooting weeds. The judge's eyebrows rose. His voice remained perfectly neutral as he asked, "Mr. Briggs, did you remove these lights?" Malik opened his mouth to speak, maybe to lie, maybe to spin, maybe to blame Malik, but the judge had already reached behind his bench for a folder. "Let me rephrase. Did you destroy these lights after being notified they were part of a pending disability lawsuit against your HOA?" Silence. A silence that felt like it stretched across the entire world. The judge's gavel hit the bench once, sharp enough to break the spell. Default judgment, full damages, any and all costs. And given the intentional destruction of evidence, board members will be held personally liable. The number that followed made the courtroom gasp. $4.2 million. Not from the HOA, from each board member individually. The room spun. One woman fainted. Leonard's mouth hung open, but nothing came out. He looked like a man who had seen the ocean opened and swallowed him whole. That should have been the end of the story, but what makes it worthy of Honorbound Tales is everything that happened afterwards. Because when word spread, the neighborhood exploded. Some people sobbed about losing their savings, their homes, their futures. Some raged that Malik should have just talked it out. Others whispered that Leonard had finally been taken down after years of bullying. And some, those who knew the law, muttered quietly that this was a warning shot, that you can push people only so far before the universe pushes back with interest. Leonard tried to blame the judge, the board, Malik, anyone but himself. But every reporter, every investigator, every legal expert said the same thing. The HOA had become a petty dictatorship, and petty dictators always fall the hardest. A month later, the neighborhood voted to dissolve the board entirely. The HOA president resigned in tears. The treasurer declared bankruptcy. And Leonard, he disappeared from public view. House listed for sale, blinds closed, lawn overgrown. The man who used to march around with a clipboard now couldn't even walk his neighborhood without someone filming him. But Malik? Life changed for him in a way that felt almost balanced. He didn't flaunt his victory. He didn't post online. He didn't run for HOA. He simply rebuilt the lights, one by one, this time with even greater brightness and durability. The new lights cast soft trails across his entire yard, guiding him through the night with gentle certainty. Neighbors who once avoided him began stopping to say hello, bringing cookies, handwritten notes, sometimes apologies for not stepping in sooner. People finally saw him, not as a problem, not as a rule breaker, not as a nuisance to be controlled, but as a man who had been patient, polite, reasonable, and pushed to defend himself only when every other door had been slammed shut. He never gloated, never rubbed salt in the wound. He just lived. And maybe that was the real victory. Not the money, not the headlines, not the downfall of people who refused to see him as human. But the fact that sometimes good people win, not by yelling the loudest, but by standing their ground when it matters most. Now I want to hear from you. What's the most outrageous moment you've ever seen where someone pushed the wrong person too far and learned their lesson the hard way?